Students need to be able to make a great argument to find success at school and in so many professions. They're going to need to come up with an idea, find evidence, analyze that evidence, and tie it all together with a beautifully written bow. So, for many decades, students have written essays. We've taught them to write thesis statements, organizing sentences, transitions, topic sentences, and conclusions. We've taught them how to punctuate their quotations and how to analyze them. We've typed up fixes for common errors, guided peer editing workshops, created revision stations, and so much more to help them write better essays. Then they go home, and so often they just don't see the relevance of their essays to their lives. They do see argument all around them. In the children's books they read their little siblings, the political ads they see on YouTube, in Instagram carousels about big issues that matter to them, in polarized podcasts playing in the background of their lives, infographics, hither and yon, TikTok videos, trying to convince them to dump their gummy bears in Sprite and stick it all in the freezer, and in a million other places. So what if, mixed in with our essays, we pushed students to notice how argument surrounds them, to learn from new ways ideas are shared and supported outside the traditional essay sphere? Maybe, just maybe, all of that noticing and learning and experimenting with fresh takes would help them with their essays. Today's request for this summer's Plan My Lesson series comes from a teacher looking for ways to practice argument that do not revolve around an essay. This is a fun one for me because I've designed so many projects like this, but it's also challenging because I've designed so many projects around this and I've already talked about them here on this podcast. I'd kind of like to give you 50 different ways to practice argument without an essay, and I probably could. We could get into designing literary food trucks and arguing for each detail as a reflection of the book. We could talk about hexagonal thinking for argument, about designing infographics, recording podcasts, holding mock trials, creating visual research carousels, exploring real-world quick prompts with real-world audiences, argument one-pagers. Honestly, there are so many ways to go. But we've covered so much of this on the pod already, and the point of this series is to design one single class period, a plan for one day. So instead of diving back into one of these topics, let's explore a new one, using children's books to search out fresh craft moves when it comes to argument. Today, we'll explore one lesson in which students see how an author can combine visuals, humor, argument, and counterargument to make a clear, persuasive case on an issue. Sure, a children's issue, with children as an audience, but the same rules could apply for any argument. After exploring some fabulous and hilarious mentor texts, students will try it out for themselves, focusing on the hesitations of their audience, or in other words, counterargument. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more. More creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. So we're going to start with classroom setup today because I want you to shift your seating around a little bit. Before students even arrive, pull your seating into small groups if it's not like that already. You're going to want to have as many groups as you have children's books checked out from the library. More on that in just a moment. So let's give a little bit of context before we dive into the plan. This lesson is going to revolve around children's books that make an argument. Now, in your life as a reader, as a parent maybe, or a friend or uncle or aunt or mentor to young kids, you may know of many children's books that make an argument. So I'm going to suggest some today, but feel free to substitute in some of your own. My top pick is going to be Mo Willems's work because I just love his books so much. We own almost all of them, having picked them up at a book fair years ago for my kids, and we're specifically going to focus on humorous titles from Mo Willems' work, like The Pigeon Has to Go to School, Don't Let the Pigeon Stay Up Late, The Pigeon Needs a Bath, Waiting is Not Easy, and Should I Share My Ice Cream? These are such wonderful books. Mo Willems carefully addresses counter-argument after counter-argument in these books, as his characters go through a very long process of not wanting to follow a common rule of childhood and coming up with dozens of reasons to support their opinion, and then realizing that that common rule actually is for the best. So these books all have their own thesis, a very simple thesis, an expected thesis, but what's not expected is how the argument unfolds. We'll talk about that more in a second. Okay, so you've got your seating pulled around, you've picked up some books. Now the lesson is actually going to start. I want you to have your agenda projected up on the board, just like we've talked about throughout this series. It helps kids stay on task. It cuts down on questions. It's really helpful. And I'm also going to suggest, as usual, that you start with a quick community building attendance question. Today, as a segue into the topic of the class, I'd suggest asking students what book they most loved as a little kid. Now, you're going to get a wide range of answers. Hopefully, you'll hear about a bunch of fun books that kids remember from their earlier years, and you'll start to get them thinking back to what kind of books they found meaningful when they first began to read a long time ago. All right, for the next part of the lesson, we're taking advantage of those books you've picked up at the local library or that you've snagged on Overdrive or Libby and made available with digital access in your classroom. You're going to want to scatter those around to the different stations that you have, but you're going to want to keep one or two at the start of class to read out loud. So this is just going to kind of warm up the class for what you're going to be doing today. I am going to suggest that for your read alouds, just if you want to use my suggestions, you choose Should I Share My Ice Cream, which is a book about Elephant and Piggy by Mo Willems, and The Pigeon Needs a Bath, which is about the hilarious character Pigeon from Mo Willems. Before you read the books, I want you to ask students to take note of a few things. Basically, they're going to be jotting down how do they think that Willems is making an argument in the book. In this case, one of the books makes an argument for sharing, and the other one makes an argument for taking a bath. But if you're using other books, that's fine. Just ask students to notice how he makes the argument and how the author addresses the hesitations that kids might be feeling about whatever the thing is that the author is trying to convince them to do. If this is the first time you've ever introduced counterargument, you might want to take a few minutes here just to talk about why it's important to address the hesitations, the questions people have when you're trying to convince someone of something. Why not just tell them the reasons why the thing is good? Why do you have to acknowledge the fact that they might not think it's good and explain, why you think your argument is more powerful than theirs? So you've kind of set up the lesson now by introducing the concept of counterargument and reading a couple of children's books out loud, fun, hilarious, at least to me, children's books that help students start to see a different take on making an argument. Now you're going to put the books that you read out loud out in your stations around the room along with whatever other books you have. And you're going to give students a few minutes to look at the book at their station. So if you have like 4 kids sitting in one little cluster and the book at that table is Don't Let the Pigeon Stay Up Late, then those kids are going to dive into Don't Let the Pigeon Stay Up Late. You're going to give them like 5 minutes, maybe a little bit more. You read the room and see how it's going. Give them some kind of a graphic organizer called Map the Argument. Now you can design this, scaffold it for your level of kids, whatever you think would be helpful to them. They can draw sort of like a little diagram of the pieces of the argument, like argument, supporting detail, counter argument, conclusion, things like that. Or you can give them a checklist of things that they're looking for, like, they can make little tallies by all the counter arguments they see or all the reasons for the arguments that they see, etc. Now, if I was trying to map out the argument in, for example, the pigeon has to go to school, it would look really different from a traditional essay. The argument in that book is really just that kids should attend school, even though they might be feeling nervous before their first day of school. And there are so many counter arguments that go totally unrefuted through the beginning of the book. The pigeon comes up with page after page after page of reasons why he's scared to go to school and why he shouldn't have to go. And of course, this mimics what kids who are listening to this book are probably thinking, because parents tend to read this book to kids before their very first day of school. Teachers tend to read it on the very first day of school. So there's all these reasons. In the diagram, I might have like 25 counter arguments listed in my little graphic. And then at the very end, the pigeon imagines like a dream place for learning. And that dream place basically refutes every worry that he's just listed. And there's this bit of kind of dramatic irony because the reader knows that this little dream place that he imagines that would fix all the problems he's worried about is actually what school is. It's exactly describing school, but the pigeon doesn't know that because he's never been. And so the setup of the argument, instead of giving an argument and then analyzing a bunch of evidence, this book gives 30 counter arguments and then refutes them all on a single page, and then finishes. And so it's like a really different take on the argument, and a really fun take on the argument. And it really, like, even for me, after years and years and years of writing and persuading, it made me think, like, what a fascinating way to drive home a point, to just bring up all these reasons why it might not be true and then just refute them all in one paragraph. It's kind of amazing. So your point here in these stations is just for kids to get around to as many of them as they can. So depending on the length you have of the class, you might have kids look at 2 books or 3 books. Rotate after you feel like they've had enough time to work on their graphic organizer a little bit and get some takeaways from their book. Have them rotate to other books as many times as you want. And then take a little bit of time to come back to the group and talk about the styles of argument that they discovered, right? Did they find one that went counter-argument, argument, counter-argument, argument? Are they all just long series of counter-arguments and then refutations? Like, what sort of structures did they discover in the children's books? So then you're going to turn around in the next part of class, and I know we're going to be getting toward the end of the class now, and you're going to have students try it out for themselves. They're just going to make like a little mini sort of stick figure storyboard of a children's book of their own, following one of these structures, or at least playing around with elements that they discovered in these structures. Instead of following a more traditional argument format, they're going to make an argument around something in a unique way that plays around with structure, like these books that they've used as mentor texts. So take a couple of minutes as a class to brainstorm topics that kids might need to be convinced about. So maybe kids hate standing in line at school, and the book is going to be called Lines Are Stupid. Or maybe kids just feel that they're not homework people, and it's going to be called I'm Not a Homework Person, or whatever. Like things that kids disagree with that are sort of commonly held rules about childhood. Or if you want to give a little comic twist, you could change it up and make teenagers the audience, and you could have them brainstorm things that teenagers might need to be convinced about. Then give them some time with a partner or on their own, whatever they prefer, to storyboard a few pages of a children's book on this topic, using some of these structures that they've just experimented with. So I think this could be so much fun. This is something you could really expand. You could turn this into a project that you spent a couple of days on. And then from there, you could work on using some of the techniques in written arguments about the book that you're reading or about some real world issue. You can kind of decide how far you want to go with this. This could just be a 10-minute activity to wrap it up, or you can expand it into something bigger. If you just use it as a 10-minute activity to wrap up this lesson, I would suggest giving kids a little bit of time to work on their storyboards, and then just in the last couple of minutes of class, having them do a quick gallery walk. Invite them all to take a little piece of paper that you give them that says like book contract award, and think of themselves as a publisher. Have them go around and look at the storyboards and think of this as just like a pitch sort of proposal day at a book fair where they're going to choose an author to work with as a publishing house. And so they're just going to give a book contract to one of the stories that they find really persuasive and interesting and funny, whatever their criteria are. They're just going to fill out their little paper and say like, this is the proposal that I would bankroll and this is why. Then they can turn that into you for a little bit of accountability during the gallery walk. Now, if you still have 1 minute to spare, you could do an exit task as you wrap up the day. Invite students to think about all the places that argument shows up in the world besides in essays. Have everyone just contribute 1 or 2 mediums to a great big giant list on your whiteboard as they head out the door. Okay, so we've reached the end of the lesson. It was action-packed. Let's talk quickly, as we always do, about our teaching takeaways from today. One of my favorite takeaways from today's lesson is the idea that you can find fodder for your lessons everywhere. I'm sure you've experienced the fact that teacher brain is almost always on, and whenever you see something exciting or interesting, it's just like, boom, how could I build a lesson around this? And I think that's wonderful. If you loved it, or everyone's talking about it, or it's gone viral, or your kids liked it, or it stopped you in the street because you were so excited, why not design a lesson around it, right? I mean, that's fantastic. My kids and I have loved Mo Williams' books so much, and we loved his amazing video series at the Kennedy Center during the pandemic, so it was really easy for me to imagine a way to incorporate them into a lesson. But the same could be true for so many things. Maybe you stop at a beautiful food truck and suddenly start to wonder, what would a Macbeth food truck look like? You watch a viral cat video and think to yourself, my students could write the internal monologue of that cat using their vocabulary words. You hear a popular rap song and you notice 6 literary devices in it, and pretty soon a new lesson on poetic language is born. Another big takeaway for today is the idea of mentor texts. When it comes to argument, finding people making their points in interesting ways can really help amp up student engagement and give them fresh options for their writing toolboxes. Penny Kittle did a really amazing workshop about the way she uses mentor texts and writing notebooks in class for us in the Lighthouse, if you want to dive deeper into this idea. Mo Williams is so incredibly persuasive when it comes to teaching kids that school's not so scary, that waiting is worth it, that sharing is rewarding, and so many other topics. So why not apply some of his techniques to arguing for, well, pretty much anything? Finally, there's the gallery walk. That's a real go-to for me as a way to get kids out of their seats and let them see the best work happening in class. I always recommend to you that you give students some specific action to take while they're doing a gallery walk, as it will very quickly become social and end fast if you just let kids wander around. Even if you're kind of right there wandering with them and you keep saying, look at the projects, what do you notice about the projects? You really have to give them some specific task, whether it's filling out a ballot about their favorite or, writing a comment to 2 different groups or whatever it is. In this case, it's the book contract idea, but just some specific task is going to get you the best results. All right, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about this essayless argument lesson. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative. know, there's help for when you need print and go creativity for your classroom. There's help when you feel like all you have time to do is dash off comprehension questions, and that's just not the way you want to teach. Did you know I have a curriculum membership for creative ELA teachers? It's like the assistant you've always wished for, the curriculum you need, ready to adapt to your specific classroom. This is my 5th year running the Lighthouse, and I've learned so much from the 2,000 plus teachers who have joined me there, and it just keeps getting better. If you're a secondary ELA teacher looking for more creativity in class without your work bag following you around like a shadow, and you want a creative community that gets what you go through every day, the Lighthouse is waiting for you. This is the program where you get immediate access to curriculum across more than 30 themes, like podcasting, one-pagers, argument, choice reading, book clubs, poetry, and short stories. This is the program where you get a sub-plan library you can lean on anytime you need a day, for any reason. This is the program where you'll find a creative community waiting to cheer your wins and share fresh ideas day after day. This is the program where you'll find on-demand video workshops from leaders across our field, like Penny Kittle and John Spencer. This is the program where I share everything I create. This is the program where we go all in. Are you ready to explore how the Lighthouse can transform your teaching? Make sure you're signed up for my weekly creative teaching emails so you'll get your invitation the next time the doors open.